One's fine.
Okay.
I've got down elections, treasurer, facility, and then fair.
Yeah. Well, there was supposed to be county clerk in there at one point
Yeah,
from
she
1
got
to
moved.
2, but
Yeah, she got moved.
moved.
Yeah, so elections, treasurer, and then facilities, and then fair association.
That's what I've got too.
And then we go back into another commission.
Tomorrow's gonna be a long day. Or Wednesday.
They're all long
Thursday,
days anymore,
Friday.
it seems like. Now, where did that
Not that it
get?
really matters, but at the end of the day, what we're gonna do is heart's gonna get broke. And we're not gonna make anybody happy, but who do we make them least happy?
Yeah, and that's impossible to make people happy. I mean, everyone happy. you
Sounds
know.
more like elections to me.
Yep. Who's the least happy person here?
Think-
Andrew Howe, you're up.
I'm hoping not to win the least happy person award. That's not good.
Give it to come up. You go call.
I went with that way the first year, Bill, the big
Yeah.
binder, but I didn't like it. I went with the individual file folders, so that if I just want to take one home, I can just take one
One
part
home.
instead of having to
Drag this,
drag the whole thing.
I
Well-
tried to turn to the, like, one of the back pages and I was like, this is impossible.
Yeah, yeah, I went with the individual file folders.
well, I was gonna try to add the new sheets as I go here.
Yeah.
Probably should make any controversy.
Kevin, I'm cursing you for getting me to agree to do the 6 a.m. show at KSNT.
Hey, I'll tell you, you're all jazzy at 7 o'clock, but by 3 o'clock, you're like, where's my nap?
Yeah,
We're streaming.
I'm already there.
All right,
So
we're
She
there.
has started.
All right. All right. Well, it's budget season. This is the election office. Andrew, you're on, I guess.
Okay. Andrew Howell, Shawnee County Election Commissioner. I'm just going to talk generally for just a couple of minutes here about what we do, just kind of a reminder of the processes and overview of what we do and how we do it, and then we'll get into the details. Thank you again, Commissioners, for the chance to visit with you and the public today about what we do and how we do it and the price tag that's attached to that. Just a couple of reminders. In the election office, we feel like we're constantly fighting two different competing interests. One, meeting our budgetary constraints, which for taxpayer consideration is an important thing to keep in mind with everything that we do. On the other side, we are constantly working at complying with statutes and complying with the law. And the reality is, we're not really in charge of as much as we would like to be for making those budgets happen perfectly. For example, the letter we recently sent out to every voter in the county, we emphasized you really have three options. The law allows you to choose the way that you want to vote. You can vote advance ballots, by mail, you can vote in the office, or you can vote at the polling place. And each of those has a different cost variable with it. So while we build a budget and make a lot of assumptions, it may or may not be a perfectly reflection of what we have to do and how we have to do it. You'll see on the handout that we provided you today on that second page, under election administration, we've kind of got a chart that I like to call the fenced-in world of elections, where we have to meet all of these requirements at the same time, and they all have competing processes and competing expenses and competing considerations. Federal requirements under HAVA and under NVRA, we have to meet those requirements. There is no option not to meet those. And so if processes change, we still have to make it happen. Same thing with the county requirements. There are a number of county requirements that we have to meet. for what we pay election workers, for different buildings that are available to us, and other processes for hiring people to work for us. Additionally, the state has requirements that we have to meet. We actually get new requirements every year, and we're not able to fully anticipate what those are like from the Secretary of State. Every year we get continual guidance from him, and that tends to morph and change depending on the Elvis system and the new requirements. For example, I know they've made some recent changes to Elvis that are actually taking us longer now to process every ballot and every ballot request. There's really no way to perfectly anticipate that. It just has to be done. Those changes occur, and we do the best that we can to meet those. And then there are court decisions and court orders. For example, some of the things related to the process for people to register to vote and proof of citizenship. Those things are constantly evolving as a result as well of court decisions and court orders. And then finally, we come down to customer expectations and customer service requirements that we kind of voluntarily impose. We think that people should be able to vote within 15 minutes. That's kind of our internal guideline and our internal time frame for how long people should stand in line before we think it's excessive. The federal number, and again, this includes Pennsylvania, New York, is 30 minutes, but we feel like here that 15 is a reasonable number. So that's one of the things our assumptions are based upon. So let me talk, in addition to just giving you that overview, let's talk for just a minute about the kinds of things that we do every year generally. We usually start the year off by playing catch up on all the things that we weren't able to do in the November and December. As you know, every November we're busy getting the final results out for each election. We're busy updating all of the provisional ballots, and that takes us pretty much, getting those records halfway under control takes us through December. And then in January, we're busy playing catch up on registration changes and all the other things that occurred in that last election. So that takes us January and February to catch most of the records up internally for almost 112,000 voters roughly that we currently have. So, and then we start all over again. In February, we begin our NVRA, National Voter Registration Act processes, and we call it list maintenance activities. We mail out to every voter in the county our current information for them and encourage them to get back with us if something has changed. And so every year we receive thousands of cards back for people who have moved or the information is not correct. So it's a way for us to clean up our lists and keep and maintain good records of where people live, where they're registered, and how accurate those registrations are. That usually takes us through the end of March, off into the beginning of April, at what point in time we are actually then working on all of the processes related to candidates and getting candidates filing prepared. And that's kind of a whole lengthy process as well. Then by June 1, we've usually got people filed. That's the candidate filing deadline. There's a lot of work around preparing each of those and making sure that the people at Governmental Ethics have all the right documents, checking with them to make sure they received everything. And then by June the 13th, we try to send our ballot order to the printer. And then at this point, the calendar really just takes off. By June 18th, we've got federal service ballots. Again, the deadline for federal service is those 45 days before an election. So every one of those ballots has to be prepared and sent to that person, and it is a significant violation of federal law if that is not done. In fact, the Department of Justice not only checks with the Secretary of State, but also with us to make sure it was done and that time frame was met. So there's a significant amount of pressure with making sure that's done and completed. And then usually around July 11, we begin training 100 supervising judges for the upcoming election. And then we have each of the 500 to 800 election workers also have to be scheduled and tracked and verified where they're working. And that communication piece is a lot of work because, as you can imagine, election workers come and go. Their schedules changes. They have health issues that occur. So, and especially in the COVID environment, assuming this, to be honest with you, we really don't have any allowance in this budget, just for the record, for any COVID issues for 21. So keep that in mind as we go through. And that actually makes keeping track of these kinds of issues more difficult as it relates to communicating with people. Just to quickly go through it, after we've done all of the training of our election workers, there's the last day to register to vote. Every presidential, I have 3,000 to 4,000 registration dumped on us that last day that then have to be processed quickly, so there's some overtime. There's just no way around it with that tight time frame and that many registrations popping up at the last second. there's just a heavy weekend of trying to catch up and having enough people on hand to do it, because they have to be registered timely so they're in the poll book when ready for Election Day. Then we begin mailing advance ballots, usually somewhere around July 14th, 15th, and then we begin voting in the office on July the 18th. And that's a 2-week process and requires, 20 to 30 people to handle that. So we're staffing up, and a lot of these people, in order to save the county money, we do not use full-time people. These are people that we have to train for each election cycle to handle all these detailed processes of handling the ballot applications, getting all those ballots ready to go. Again, that's going to be a little bit of a challenge even this year, making sure that if we get 30 or 40,000 ballots before next Wednesday, no matter what, by law, we have to have them in the mail and ready to go. So we're, at this very moment, I think, struggling just a little bit with making sure that we have the staff ready, that we have the process and the processing ability to handle 5,000 ballots a day if it comes to that. Handling not only the applications as they come in, but also getting the ballots in the envelope, getting them out, and getting all 450 different ballot styles in the correct envelope. So as we handle the early voting, then again, we're also still doing the training of the election workers, and we're conducting the public test of voting equipment. The public has the right to attend that, as do the press. That takes a little bit of time to verify that every ballot is set up correctly and that every paper ballot, which we use all paper ballots here in Shawnee County, just so that if there's ever a question, we've always got the ability to impanel a group of Republicans and Democrats to verify what actually did or did not occur. So we've tested all those, and then by early August, usually it's the end of voting in person at noon that Monday before election. There's a lot of processes involved there with turning the data around and getting those paper poll books, well, the electronic poll books ready to go for Election Day. And then that late Monday, we're going to be providing each judge with their ballot and supplies so they're ready to go the next day, making sure that all the equipment is out and properly placed and secure. And then we've got primary day, of course, just a huge day. Usually it's August 2nd, 3rd, 4th, somewhere in there, making sure that that goes correctly and everybody follows the processes as required. And then up to 10 to 14 days later, we'll have that canvassers meeting where we will actually deal with the provisional ballots and make final determinations of numbers. So then that preparation usually involves close to 1,000 ballots, sometimes a few more. So there's a lot of prep time doing the legal work and the legal preparation behind the scenes. So that's a quick overview. And again, you repeat that process again between early August and November for that second major general election each year. And as you know, every even year now we have general elections which involve federal races and state races. And then in the odd years we have city, school races. And then we also have drains every other 4-year cycle. So there's some complexity, and Mark will talk about some of that here shortly too, in that you really have a hard time comparing to the prior year and at times even to the 2 years out. So Mark will go over that here with you in just a minute as we talk about those details. We have over 110,000 registered voters in Shawnee County. We do a mass mailing. We do the national change of address process to make sure that our records are accurate. We used to do interstate cross-check. I think that is still, we try to make sure that our records, we bump them against other states, at least in the past. I think the Secretary of State's still kind of reviewing that process. Do birth matches, death matches. There are actually 58 different data points for every registered voter that have to be correct and be followed and tracked. So it's a fairly involved process. There are, I believe, 223 voting precincts. But that puts us at 446 different ballot styles, all of which have to be verified, and we have to make sure they're accurate. We make sure that we track those, and that we send out the correct ballot to every voter. A lot of work. And then we have annexations from the city that we have to also change within all 3 databases that we maintain to make sure that we're getting the right information to the right person. We maintain 100 polling places, and remember there's a 28-page process that we have to go through to comply with federal law to make sure that we're compliant with ADA rules. So that takes quite a bit of time. Up to 800 election workers, depending on which election it is, all have to be trained. And then we have 10 FTEs to help us keep track and manage all that, and up to 80 intermittents, depending on where we're at in the election cycle, to help us accomplish all of the things that we've just talked about. I expect that our advanced mail ballot numbers will continue to go up. And to be honest with you, the advanced mail probably is the thing that concerns me the most going forward. We don't have any changes in our budget. If people begin using more of those, it will cost more money. It takes a lot more time to process people, to make sure that we get the right ballot out to the right person. So something to think about going forward. We don't have additional money in here for that. And I do expect as people get more used to it with COVID, not knowing going into 21 where we're going to be with that, that's something to consider. We also have at least 13 mobile polling facilities. Part of the law, part of the requirements of the law, it's optional, but we try to do it as much as we can to assist people, especially in these nursing home facilities that the law allows, with getting their ballots done early. That is an option. It helps people with mobility issues, and I think in COVID this is going to be even more difficult for nursing homes. It's a way for us to help them get their vote in, and that we will visit each facility and try to do that. We're struggling a little bit with that this year, so we're going to see how that goes going forward. But we're trying to work with the nursing facilities to make it easy for them and their people. And frankly, it helps us on Election Day keep our lines quicker and our processes a little bit quicker to have already worked with those people. We have nearly 300 electronic poll books. They include printable turn-by-turn directions. If you show up at the wrong polling place, we're trying to make it easier for voters to know where to go and how to get there. So we also have a ballot style system for each one. We think it's, back in 2017, we actually won an award from the International Association of Government Officials because we spent a lot of time requiring our vendors to help us do a better job of making sure that every voter gets the correct ballot. We like that system. We were recognized, and I think Shawnee County voters should take pride in knowing this was the first place to do it. We got recognized for the help that it is to both election administrators and to voters to make sure they get the correct ballot. So a lot of the innovative work that we did on that was recognized, and so I like mentioning it because I think people should be proud that we've helped innovate, making sure that voters get the correct ballot on Election Day. And then finally, at every polling place, we have at least one HAVA or ADA compliant ballot marking device. And again, that actually is a touchscreen system, but it prints out a paper ballot. So again, every voter can verify multiple times that they got the correct ballot, that it was marked the way they wanted, and they had multiple opportunities to review that. And then security of elections also, I think, our folks at IT are doing a very good job of working on that for us. But going forward, I think we don't have a lot in here to deal with any additional security concerns. So you might think about talking to IT about what they're doing there additionally. If you want us to do additional things, I guess we don't really have any money in here for that specifically, but it's a concern. And I think we're going to be talking to you in the future, I know, about additional security in the building. We really haven't put any specific plans together, but we know there are some issues there that may need to be addressed. Physical security issues like fenced locked building, video surveillance, fog proximity readers for building access, standalone servers in its own room so that there's no ability for bad actors to get to the results on election night. All these are things that we've already taken steps to do, but we think there's room for improvement additionally. Lockable, secure ballot racks, ballot storage is in a locked compartment, tamper-proof evidence security seals on all election equipment, military-grade encryption media device. All these are things that we deal with making sure are functional. We feel pretty good about where we're at, but like I said, there's always room for improvement. In process security, we always use at least 2 staff of differing political parties for processes. All board members have different differing political parties on them, just to make sure that we're going the extra mile to make sure that if there's ever a question, you've always got somebody from differing parties on all of those boards. Again, that's kind of my overview of what we do and how we do it, and it's a very high-level review. I toyed with giving you a spreadsheet of every process that we do, and it's 50 pages long, and it goes and goes and goes, so I won't dump that on you today. But at some point in the future, we probably will show you kind of some of those detailed processes. The other thing, I think I'll just go ahead and let Mark get into the details of the budget and kind of how we got to where we're at. We've given you that bigger spreadsheet there. And then if we've got any further questions, we'll try to follow up at the end with those. So, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. Mark Stock, Shawnee County Election Office. I provided each of you a copy of this color-coded spreadsheet, and that's what I'll go through. Just had a few comments to follow up with Election Commissioner Howell. County government is required by law to do certain things, and I know I'm preaching to the choir. You're required to have a county sheriff, do law enforcement. You're required to do roads and bridges. One of the core functions in Kansas that county government is not talked about generally is you are required to conduct elections. It is a core function of county government, and it's not mentioned often, and so I think it's prudent to talk about that. You don't have a choice. You have to run elections in Kansas. And so that kind of predicates some of the things. The other thing that I did want to mention to follow up with Commissioner Howell, we have a motto in our office. It's accuracy over speed. People talk about, okay, you only work a couple days a year. What do you do the rest of the year? That is one misconception. The other is, so we're putting ballots in envelopes to send out to voters. Sounds like a pretty easy little task to do. As the commissioner said, in this election, we have 446 different ballot styles. What happens if we get the wrong ballot in the wrong envelope? It's pretty serious when you're dealing with somebody's civil rights that you get them the information they need and get them the ballot they need, and then you count it correctly and accurately, and then you report the results. And so we take very seriously what we do. And I think some of the tasks that we do seem to sound easy at first, but if there's ever a mistake, the ramifications could be pretty huge. What if the wrong equipment got sent to the wrong polling place? What if we can't get into the polling place? And so the fenced-in world of elections that the commissioner handed out to you, customer expectations, is actually a greater thing than what it may seem like at first, because voters expect certain things. Sometimes we can deliver, sometimes we can't. One of the things that we are dealing with in this election, as you folks can imagine, is we don't really necessarily have a binding legal agreement with our polling places. And if they decide they don't want to participate, they will let us know, and it may or may not be timely. So what do we do with all those voters that are assigned to those places? So it's an ongoing challenge, and just want to make you aware of that. As we get into this spreadsheet, we thought that probably one of the best things to do was to lay this out, hopefully in a manner that makes sense to you. So let me just kind of preface this a little bit. A lot of the elected officials' terms, as you folks know, is 4-year terms. So we have what we consider like elections roughly every 4 years. And so in the even years, as the commissioner mentioned, we will have a presidential election, and there's certain offices that are on the ballot during that year, and then that's repeated every 4 years. Then in the next even numbered year would be the gubernatorial year, and a lot of state offices are in that. And then as well, there's county and local offices that are on staggered terms as well, whether that's city council, whether that's township offices, or whether that's county commission. And so this 4-year cycle kind of lends itself to looking every 4 years. Now, there are some similarities between some of the even years and some of the odd years. For instance, in 2019 was an odd year election, but what was interesting about 2019 was, for the first time that we could ever find in recorded history, Shawnee County did not have a primary election. Talked to a 40-year assistant election commissioner in Shawnee County, Noreen Staub, and she said, well, if you're going to look for this, I would start looking back in some of the archives at the Historical Society or the Capitol Journal, and I'd start in the 50s. I said, Noreen, if I got to go back to the 50s, I'm going to say we never had one. But the important thing is, for this budget, if we were looking at 19, we didn't have primary election expenditures to compare to. 2017 was an odd year, odd-numbered year election, but Topeka mayor was on the ballot. So one of the things that we do in looking at budgets is what kind of election are we expecting? What offices are we expecting? What's the impact for that? whenever Topeka mayor is on the ballot, we will generally try to budget for a City of Topeka citywide primary election. Because typically when mayor is on the ballot, there will be a citywide primary election. And so we plan that way. If it doesn't happen, then the county saved some money. If we didn't plan that way and it happened, our budget wouldn't be so nice and pretty at the end, shall we say. So we try to take a look at that. With 2017, it was also the first year of a change in state law that moved the city school elections, as we call the odd year elections, to the fall from the spring, which was a little bit of a change for us. But the other thing it did, it took all of the drainage district director elections and moved those to that year and every 4 years thereafter. We have 5 drainage districts in Shawnee County that we conduct elections for. The only one we do not conduct elections for by state law is Tri-County, but we hold elections for the drainage district elections for those 5 drainage districts. Likewise, Sherwood Improvement District directors are up for election every 2 years. Every odd year, we hold elections for those district directors. So I want to point that out because I think that the differences in those odd year elections are significant with the budget, and we're going to go down through this. So what we tried to do with this document, it's how we actually kind of go through the budget and development. So on this spreadsheet, you will see in the first column, series of columns, is basically our object of expenditure. Then what we did is we laid down what our 2017 actual expenditures are. And we've highlighted those in a light green for you. Then we laid down our 2019 actual expenditures, and we've highlighted that in yellow. And then we put down our 2019 working budget. We put down our 2020 adopted budget, and we highlighted it in light blue. And then next to that is our 2021 department request. Then what I did next to that was, again, highlighted in light green, is comparing our 21 department requests to our 2017 actuals. Okay? Then in the next couple of columns, I put down comparing our 2021 department request to the 2019 actual expenditures. And again, in that yellow highlighted. And then in the next couple of columns, then I compared our 2021 department request to the 2020 adopted budget. Then I've got a column for comments and explanations, and then I've got a column which says expense items allocated to these object lines, so that we could refer to and help say these are the expenditures that we take out of this line item. And again, the idea with this is there are certain things that when we're putting the budget together, we will compare to the like election, which was 4 years earlier. And actually 3 years earlier at the time we're doing the budget, because that's the other thing, and just a side note here, when we put the budget together in late April, early May, we are trying to predict what will happen the following calendar year, knowing that the big election, if you will, in both years is in early November, which means our major expenditures really aren't coming through and hitting the budget until the last quarter of the year. So we're trying to predict what our expenditures will be some 18 months ahead of time sometimes. And as the election commissioner mentioned, a lot of times we have no control over what's coming in. For instance, take a look at ballots, and we'll get down to the cost of ballots here pretty quickly. But how many people are running for U.S. Rep. 2nd District? How many people ran for governor, secretary of state last year? The length of the ballot is really not under our control. It's all predicated by how many candidates file, how many constitutional amendment questions are there, how long are those? What about questions submitted by other jurisdictions? And so trying to predict that, we'll say a good 12 to 18 months ahead of time, can be tricky at best, especially when the legislature at one time was considering 3 different constitutional amendments that could have hit this year. And so just navigating through those waters. As the commissioner said, how many people change their voter registration? How many of our customers will actually apply for a mail ballot? And so that's some of the tricky things to look at. But when we start, we're going to go back to the next like year, which in this case was 2017. If it does make sense in some cases to go back to the closest like numbered year, in this case 2019, and I actually prefer to use the actual expenditures because at the time we're doing this, we know what those are. Those are known numbers. And then we have other expenditures that we like to compare to what's been adopted in the 2020. For instance, utilities. It makes sense that since we're covering utilities in this budget, that we use the most current information we have. So, and what I've tried to do for the most part, commissioners, is on the left is highlight in gray those items that are the major impact to the budgets. And of course, we can talk about MSA 1, which is personnel if you'd like, but I really didn't include much discussion on that. We certainly can, should you want to. I think the election commissioner kind of went over that. The size of our staff and the help that we have varies so much by election, but in a presidential election year, when you have 800 election board workers, you've got some 40 to 60 intermittent staff, and you have so many other folks that have to help pull off an election like that, that even the personnel budget will flex in and flex out during these different years. And we'll get into some of that. So I'm going to skip over that unless you want to talk about some of those items up in MSA 1.
I don't have any questions.
Well, actually, yeah, Mark, you have an assistant elections commissioner and an elections commissioner, I'm sorry, manager, elections manager and assistant manager that are vacant right now.
Yes, sir.
Do you want to continue to maintain those as vacancies, or would you consider maybe consolidating those into one position if we're not able to attract a person at the two respective salaries? And you've got $82,000 just between those two positions budgeted. If you were to consolidate those down to one position and be able to offer 50, would that clear and be able to hire a person at that? I mean, what's going on there?
We are actively recruiting for both of those positions. We are interviewing. We will have an agenda item for Thursday for you on one of the positions, and we need the help.
Okay.
And they're actually two different functioning types of jobs. And the interesting thing, and I appreciate your comment and your question, Commissioner, because one of the things that it seems like is that when is a good time to start? I started in April of 2012. I was hired by the former election commissioner April of a presidential year with redistricting going on. That was a year to remember. They talked about my coming on as baptism by fire. Andrew Howell came in September of 2012. That was a baptism by fire. So the folks that get hired in these two positions, it could be a baptism by fire, but there's no real perfect time to learn and train. But we hope to have both of those filled by the end of the month.
Sure. Okay. That was just a question on MSA, the first section, about the those positions, and just kind of talking about the two vacancies you've got currently.
If we go down to contractual services, we'll talk about fees for service. You will see in 2017, we had spent $40,000. In 2019, we'd spent just under $15,000. And in 20, we had budgeted $20,000. And in 2021, we are budgeting $12,000. The purpose for this review on this one, and you'll see that we actually have that shaded in yellow, so we are comparing this cost more like 2019. In 2019, we had 3 sewer backups in our building. It shouldn't be any secret to anybody here that we've got a few facilities issues that we need to deal with. One of those is during construction, it was noted that there wasn't a significant drop in that sewer line, that it was much flatter than the engineers and everybody wanted, but the cost was too much to dig it any deeper and make the necessary corrections. The sewer backups happen to occur when we're conducting board school, and we have a huge number of people coming through the building. But the cost of that was somewhere, I want to say, all of the related costs for those 3 sewer backups was just shy of $6,000. That's why we did not budget the $20,000, and it's why we don't think that we're going to be spending the $40,000. We think that the $12,000 should be able to cover that, with the caveat that we don't take on a great number of other issues like that in 2021. We did include in that cost, in the $12,000, some facilities cost that we have.
Mark,
Sir.
on that sewer issue, it was my understanding that we came out and we looked at the cost of replacement, and it was going to be a pretty high cost to replace that sewer line, and that what we came up with is that we would have periodic and frequent blasts to clear the line so that we wouldn't have any backup. And I thought that facilities had come out to make sure that we were on a regular schedule to blast that line clear so that we wouldn't have that backup like we had that in 2019.
Well, I will address it in this order, Commissioner. Yes, number one is the cost was was extremely high to redo that sewer line, absolutely. However, the second part I don't believe is accurate, in that I don't believe that that has happened.
Okay.
When, in 2019, when we had the 3 sewer backups, we initiated those, and we actually had them cleaned out. One of the discussions that we had was, we probably should put on a preventative maintenance schedule, a quarterly clean out and blast through, as you're talking about. I can tell you, Election Commissioner Howell did spend all night with one of the emergency vendors to clean out all of those sewer lines,
Yeah.
and it could not have been pretty.
Now, I would think that you're going to want to get that done here before August. It always happens when we have our higher usage, so those are your primaries and your general elections. And so I'm hopeful that you're going to have it blasted here in this month.
Well, that'd be nice. One of the things we did, Commissioner, that we will be talking about is we have moved the location of our election board worker training to another facility,
Okay.
just so we could observe social distancing and do our training in greater numbers, to the extent that we had fewer places. But then that should take a lot of the stress off the building for this election.
But when you have your August primary, you're going to have your poll workers in the building and the electorate.
You're very accurate, sir,
And we always have
so-
to drag out our emergency management
Comfort.
comfort trailer. It's every election, it's like clockwork. We have to drag it out there for the sewer.
Are you talking about the park and rec restrooms?
No, this is the emergency management trailer.
It's-
And they
yeah,
drag
it's-
it out every year, and it happens every August and every November like clockwork.
What's in that trailer?
Restrooms.
Restrooms.
Okay.
Yeah, Porta John.
Emergency management would take it over to like the Country Stampede and things like that, and it is a trailer that is self-contained, but it contains, I want to say, 5 restrooms that include shower facilities, and there's also washer and dryer in there, and it's typically used, and it's funded through Department of Homeland Security, but Aaron Mahan or Dusty Nichols could tell you more about it. But that's actually why in '20, we had a capital outlay project to put in a permanent electrical hookup, a 50-amp service at our building, so that if emergency management wanted to store it back behind our building, that they could. But we have delayed our '20 capital outlay to help with the county budget.
But so your cost then is, on that is what would be the cost then for quarterly cleanouts?
We need to check into that, sir.
Excuse me, it's my understanding that facilities can do that internally, and that they had it scheduled to do it internally. I will check on that.
Okay, I would appreciate that. I mean, especially if we can get it done before our August primary.
That would be super. Because I think we should be doing that quarterly just to avoid that, because it was quite the mess.
Commissioner Mays?
You mentioned moving the board school off-site. I know we had talked about this before. At the time, you hadn't decided on a venue yet or anything. Has that been decided? And if so, is there any additional cost incurred?
Do you want to speak to that, sir?
I've had several conversations with the people at Fellowship Bible Church, and I've offered to pay if we needed to. They've been super gracious and super willing to work with us and said no cost to the county to hold it there. So they've been very, very helpful. We appreciate their willingness to work with us. It's a large enough facility that we can observe social distancing, which was our concern about doing it in the current place where we've always done it. So, yeah, Fellowship has been very good to work with. In fact, we've got a meeting, I think, set up tomorrow to go out there and just talk through the details of how that's going to work this year. But that's the plan, and the price to the county has actually been surprisingly low at no cost, so.
The facility's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it is. It's a great location, lots of parking, a huge auditorium, which is really for social distancing purposes, keeping everybody 6 feet apart is very helpful, so.
Perfect. Thank you.
I didn't want to steal the election commissioner's thunder on that. He's worked pretty hard with getting that pulled together. The other thing that kind of comes up in this line item as well is we've had water intrusion into the building several times. And it's one of the things that we probably really need to take a look at it, although we do think a lot of it is directly related to gutters and downspouts being clogged, and then the water overrunning. We actually have video of water running out of a soffit. And so we've got a few facilities issues that we need to deal with, and one of the questions that's come up in our biweekly meetings with the county counselor and with facilities that's with Jim Crowell. And then we've also had conversations with facilities management as who has what facilities responsibility and who has what budget authority that they need to. How does that division of responsibilities occur, and how does that budget authority occur? And so I don't want any comments taken by me today as being critical of facilities management or of anybody else. It's one of the things that Andrew and I have talked about many times, in that I've got a background in facilities, he has a background in facilities, but we also have elections to run. And so taking the time for us to work on facilities issues comes at a cost to elections to some degree.
So,
Commissioner?
let me get it straight. Facility management, they don't come out and clean the gutters or anything like that, or?
It hasn't occurred on a regular basis.
Can
Yes.
I clarify for a little bit? Generally, what we do is any department that has their own building maintains that building on their own. Like, they pay their own utilities, they pay their, that types of things. Because we want them to have responsibility for that in their budget, because we think that is a better cost-effective tool. Now, any department that has that, whether it be Parks and Rec or Public Works or elections, can make a request to facilities to, do any maintenance items they need, and then facilities, can work it in as they can get to it. Or if they just absolutely can't, and it needs to be contracted, then it would have to be discussed between the two departments.
So what buildings does this facility maintain? This one and
The courthouse and the annex.
That's it?
And the health department.
And the health department?
And that's because, well, they have their own facility person. We just have that facility, they have their own facility, 2 people that are for the health department, paid out of their funds. We just have them under the supervision of the facility so they can help out elsewhere if needed.
Okay.
But like Parks and Rec, they maintain all of their buildings.
They have,
They have
yes.
Lots of buildings.
So that's kind of how it's set up countywide.
So one of the things maybe we need to do in the future is request some facilities positions for our building, because ironically, what I was getting ready to talk about was the water intrusion into the building affects the other county department tenants in the building, which is IT and the Shawnee County Sheriff. Thank God for Chuck Pretty and the folks with the Shawnee County Sheriff's Office. It's not Chuck's job, but three times, I believe, he has mopped the water up out of the IT room with the water intrusion into the building.
So, or do we have cracks in the foundation? Is it that the gutters just aren't clean?
The best we can tell is that the water is running over the gutters are backing up.
So why not just clean the gutters?
Excellent question, sir. It frankly needs to
Have
be.
you contacted facilities and asked them to?
Yes,
I'm just
and
asking.
again,
because I
yes,
don't
the
know.
answer is yes, because I have a great little video of the water dripping from the soffit, and that room closest to that drip is where our election
Okay.
standalone server is at.
Well, I mean, I guess when we get down to it, on one of your item lines is, and I know we haven't got to it yet, but you've got an increase of, from 2,500 to 7,000 for travel. Instead of putting that into travel, why wouldn't we be looking in, you've got a doubling, 2,500 to 5,000 in training. Now, training may be necessary given the changes that we've got going on, but do we really need to up our increase in travel by that much? And would that be better allocated than for those annual facility maintenance expenses?
I'll address just for a second your travel question. The reason we put the additional money in for travel is it's been 3 or 4 years since we've sent anybody to international training, and with all the security issues, I'm concerned that we're dropping behind internally on our true functional knowledge on security issues related to elections, because I don't think we've sent anybody, just out of budget concerns, for years.
Okay.
For professional certification.
But both professional certification and just truly getting into the conversation at a national level. But I just wanted to say I just want to clarify on the drainage issue and the water intrusion. We really don't know. We've looked at it. We're not certain. I'm not entirely convinced that it may have been additional water that's come inside the building from outside, actually gotten. I have some question in my mind that it's not related to the gutters, and I'm not certain. It could be both. I think it needs a lot more analysis and a lot more determination, and I don't think it's quick or easy. It appears to me that we've got a drain system on one end of the building that actually lets rainwater in to the sewer system, and so I'm not sure if that we've got kind of some backup issues that are also complicated in that way. So I'm just going to say I'm not entirely convinced that it's necessarily gutters or drainage. I think it can be part of the issue that we have, but I think we need to look at it a little more deeply.
I'm a little bit concerned. This is the first I'm hearing of this issue. I was aware of the plumbing issue and working with the issue with the sewer, but this is the first I'm hearing of this issue. And so, I'd like to see if we can't get a scope or a bid as to what's going on. And if it's just an issue that you're getting leaves and other items in the gutters, then we would just schedule a regular clean out.
I think there's an argument that it could be both, because we know that we're getting water coming off of the soffit, which scares me, because it's not that far for it to travel on into the building and come down. That concerns me. So I know there is some concern with the gutters, and that, I just wanted to say, I think there also probably ought to be somebody looking a little deeper into the sewer system, because and this is just me looking at it, not knowing for sure, but I want to make sure you're aware, I think there could be. And again, I haven't run a scope through it, I haven't done all the deep digging on it, but I think there could be some rainwater getting into the sewer system, which then exacerbates the other issues that we have. So I'm just going to throw that out in there.
Do the downspouts, they don't go into the sewer system?
Not to my knowledge. I think there's
Are they going underground, though?
Yes. Yeah, there was that was all part of the original purchase and design issue.
Could be issues underground even in those.
It's possible. So I just wanted to say it's a little more complex than it might appear at first. I think there's a lot more going on that probably ought to be dug into, because I'm concerned that IT's had water in their space twice. We're not real sure what's causing it, so it's a question mark.
What's plugging the gutters? Are we just talking about leaves?
As far as I can tell, over time, it's the accumulation of leaves, and then, as far as I can tell, that's most of it.
There's some pretty good gutter guards out there in the world that can keep a lot of that out. Maybe that's,
Additionally, I know that that the gutters themselves are old enough, and I've noticed some leaking from the gutters themselves. I think there's a couple of corners that, it may be time to look at replacement. I don't know. Again, these are questions that I have in my mind just from my experience as a contractor, but I have not taken the time to deep dive and nail it down. So I
Sometimes-
just wanted to mention those
sometimes just
exacerbating
take
question
it
marks.
bite at a time, fix the gutters and see if that fixes things. If that doesn't, you move on to the next thing, I guess.
I just wanted to
But,
mention
Again, Commissioners, I don't want any of my comments to be taken as being negative with the Facilities Management Department. They have been tremendous to work with. I think that probably one of the clarifications that we just really need to kind of have is apparently maybe we're not viewing things the same way. We see us as being in a county building with multi-department tenants, and we're happy to pay the utilities because it would not make sense in our minds for the county's perspective to separate and allocate utilities to the sheriff's office and to the IT department. That doesn't seem to, would make a lot of sense if we're paying the utilities anyway. It's all county money. Let's just cover that. So there's some expenditures that seem to come up. We do have, every year, there's a generator inspection that we have now included in the budget. There's also the fire extinguisher inspection services and the fire alarm that we have now included in this budget that we hadn't included before. If there aren't any other questions, we'll go down to the next line item of board workers that's highlighted. It's 50213. You'll see that is highlighted in green for 2017. And you'll see in 2019, we had spent $71,000. But I will remind you, in 2019, we did not have a primary election for the first time that we know of. In 20, we have budgeted $173,000. Again, that is a presidential election year. For 2021, we have budgeted $115,000. We think that we can probably be under the actual expenditure in 2017, but we know we're going to be much more than the $71,000 and that was spent in 2019.
Hey, Mark,
Sir.
if we look at your board worker expense, going back 5 years, this is your 9th election, the commissioner's 8th election. Going back 5 years ago, we started to notice that trend in advanced voters that were showing up and really seeing that voter shift. And it's just grown every year since then, is that we have more people doing the advanced voting, coming in instead of waiting till the election day. If we do see, again, a shift in voter trend to where we're using more ballots by mail, wouldn't we be looking at a pretty significant decrease? And I know we're forecasting into the future and we don't know what next year's going to look like completely, but isn't it contemplatable that what we would be looking at is a lot less board workers if we have a huge shift to mail-in ballots, and then looking at an increase in our postage cost?
Yes, that I think, Commissioner, I think would be reasonable to expect. Although I will say, for the voting in office, as we have seen that trend go up, we think that that is definitely related to the excellent customer service that voters have found by coming into the office to vote. For instance, in 2016, well, actually, let me take you back to the old office. For those of you that remember the configuration of that, and again, nothing against that building and the design of it, but voters were doing a figure 8 to vote in office, and probably our max capacity might have been 500 per day. In 2016, during the presidential election in the new office, we processed over 1,000 voters each and every day.
But isn't a lot of it, I don't have to stand in the lines that I would on polling day, and so I can get in and out on my schedule?
Well, it's actually both things in my mind. One is, first of all, you've got a 2-week period to come in and vote, And we keep our office open extra hours past 5 o'clock so voters can come in after work and vote. But in 2016, even with over 1,000 voters every day, we had a benchmark that nobody had to wait more than 5 to 7 minutes to vote from parking their car to walking back out. We think that was tremendous, and one day we did 2,500. We were busy, but we wanted to provide that customer service to our voters, that they had an excellent customer service experience when they came in to vote. And so I do think it is both things, that one, it's mighty convenient that I can pick whatever day works for me, and I can do it after 5 or over my lunch hour, but then also with the confidence of knowing I'm not going to be standing there past my lunch hour to be able to vote.
I guess my only caution on trying to reduce board worker numbers too much is there is kind of a minimum number that you really need to maintain so that you've got one person doing the check-in, one person on the ballots, make sure that's correct, and then typically at least one person managing the election machines and making sure that people know where to put their ballot.
I appreciate that, but if you have, again, we didn't predict 5 years ago we were going to have that shift to people doing advanced ballots until we realized what was happening. If we have another shift to mail-in ballots, again, if you lose a third of if it's 1/3 go to a mail-in ballot, you're going to see, again, do I need as many poll workers? Do I relook at my polling locations? Where am I allocating my resources? But we won't know that until we see, again, that shift, which hasn't happened yet.
I guess I would be a little bit cautionary in this regard. If we have more mail ballots to deal with, I actually think you'll see a net increase in cost. We'll be as efficient as we can, but I actually think you'll see a net increase in cost because mail ballots, as a general rule, take more time to manage, take more time to make sure that they get all of the labels printed and they get mail and you get the right ballot out the door. So I guess we can have a conversation about more poll workers, less poll workers, more ballots, which way. I think the more we go to mail, overall, you're going to see a slight increase in cost, and we haven't really allowed for that in these numbers. So I would be cautionary about trying to reduce one to bump the other up, because at the end of the day, we still have to pay for it however it happens. And I don't think that you're going to see us able to handle those peak. Again, it's a lot like we really have to staff for Easter Sunday. I mean, I don't want people waiting 45 minutes to show up at 7 a.m. or an hour. And then at noon, I mean, typically you have 3 peak times. You have first thing right out the gate, and then you have like a noon hour rush, and then you have a 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. rush. So I don't want us to try to staff for the 10 a.m. lull and reduce every place by one worker when we really we're going to try to estimate the best we can, kind of the numbers that we have, we think work appropriately for even the slightly lower numbers out there. I guess that's my best attempt to answer is I don't think the costs are going down. If anything, if we get more mail, it's probably going up as a net number.
The postage on mailing back a ballot, who carries that? Is that up to the voter?
As a matter of practice, Shawnee County is one of the only large counties in the state that I'm aware of that actually pays for ballots coming back to the office.
Okay.
And that's paid out of general expenses.
Yep.
General expenses. Okay. The thing I think concerning Commissioner Cook's question in trying to predict all this is, I think we're going to see a real spike in mail-in ballots this year. But in future years, where we're back to normal, if we get back there, I would see people coming back to the polls.
Yeah,
Who knows? We
We've
don't
made
know.
no assumption. Basically, nothing in this current budget was built with COVID in mind. So just
No.
know that we're just assuming everything sort of reverts back to the
I don't know.
norm, and who knows? Sorry.
One clarification. When we say that's general expenses, meaning our bulk permit, the election office has a bulk permit, and that's pays for that postage back of those ballots.
Okay.
But back to Commissioner Cook's comment, you're absolutely right. It's a resource allocation that we're constantly taking a look at. How many people do we have working for the advanced board helping out the voters that come in? How many do we have that are on the mail ballot board that's processing that? And so it really kind of highlights some of the challenges of this COVID-19 2020 year we're in that when normally we would have 2 mail ballot boards that would be starting work here in about another week, and they would work basically up through Election Day, and we're now contemplating, do we have 10 or 12 mail ballot boards processing mail ballots? Can we find that many folks willing to work? And granted, we would use some of the same folks that work on Election Day. And then how many do we need out at the polling places? So you're absolutely right. It's a constant review of resource allocation, of trying to make sure we're taking care of those customers. But it is a balancing act, and to some degree, it is somewhat of, if it's more here, there should be somewhat of an offset less here, potentially. But really, for the board workers, it might be moving them from polling place to the office to be on a mail ballot board or an advanced board assisting with it. And what will be interesting is, one of the things that we're also telling our customers is that it is July 6th. We still don't know what August 4th looks like yet. That makes it pretty tough to plan. But we're going to do the best we can, and as we tell our staff, we got to remain flexible and fluid and be able to do as we need to do to make sure that we can run the elections as they need to be ran. But, you know, it is kind of tricky. You know, we're in several locations where, are they still going to let us vote there? And we got to check back with them constantly. And I'll say even more often than weekly. How many of the nursing homes are going to let us have election polling going on? How many of the schools, how many of the churches that we're in? And, you know, thank goodness that we've got a lot of good community partners that let us be at their buildings in polling places, but some of them are a little bit kind of wondering. And so trying to react to that resource allocation is certainly more challenging this year, but to your point, sir, it'll be interesting to see if there's a new trend. And then trying to plan a budget for that will be interesting. The next item we've got is contractual services. I'll just take you through that again. We would compare it more to like 20. You'll see in 2017 it was 192,800. 2019 actual was 194,000. And in 20 adopted it was 192,643, and we're at 196,871, and that increase was mainly due to, I had this marked, we're expecting some of the costs we added the, let's see, we've got contracts with ES&S for the election equipment, No Ink for the electronic poll books, RMET for cleaning. That will probably, any of these will see an increase, I'm sure. Green Touch does the lawn care. Ozark Pest Control does the pest control in the building. Minnesota Elevator does the maintenance, preventative maintenance for the elevator. One of the things that's not budgeted for is repairs and we've experienced repairs. Tech Electronics does the fire alarm monitoring. Cox Communications provides cable service into the building. Iron Mountain does our monthly shredding of documents. Century United, we've got a copier agreement for one copier. This is not part of the equipment leases where most of the office copiers are. We've got a preventative maintenance agreement with Williams Gate Service to do preventative maintenance on the mechanical operator for the gate. And we've got a contract with Samco to do HVAC quarterly preventative maintenance. And as we know, it does not cover repairs. And I will say something that Betty mentioned, and I appreciate it. You know, we've not been denied contingency monies when we've experienced some facilities costs that haven't been budgeted by anybody. And it's been needed, for sure. This last late spring, early summer, when a fourth or fifth of our building didn't have air conditioning. It was mighty uncomfortable, but we appreciate the help from the county in getting Samco in there and getting that repaired.
Commissioner,
Yes.
it is after 11, so we might need to wrap this up.
Okay. Well, I will just stop there and say, is there anything that you folks have questions about?
My only thing is with the travel, I understand that you want to get people trained up, but are you sure that those conferences are even going to happen now? And if not, are they going to happen virtually for maybe a savings, rather than the hotel and airfare and everything that goes along with it?
That very well could be, Commissioner. I would certainly expect probably for, and of course, we didn't budget for any of this year. Typically, or I shouldn't say typically, what we did in 2019 and what we tried to do with a couple of our staff is they wanted to obtain their professional certification, and we said, that is great. But we said, in an even-numbered year, it will be difficult for us to be able to spare you out of the office to take the classes necessary, and usually they are in some locations, such as you mentioned. But I would certainly expect that for the remainder of this year, and probably a good chance maybe for '21, those might be virtually, and so there could be certainly a savings for some of that training. And depending on the situation, it may get delayed for another 2 years. Now, we know that we've got one staff member that is partway through, but there is a 12-year cap on it. If you don't get it done in 12 years, you get to start over. And so we don't want to get into that situation. I would just kind of put that out there. But certainly we are taking a look at what can be done virtually that would be saving money. And I think that is one of the things that's going to come out of this COVID is that kind of training and things is going to be a lot more acceptable for certifications.
Thank you.
My only lingering issues, here's our water issue and our gutter and things like that. Who else uses your building? Is there other county?
IT has a presence in the basement as well as the sheriff's office. That's where the backup 911 dispatch and the training occurs for the communication staff.
Yeah, IT has their backup servers in a small room in the basement, and the IT backup, the 911 is in a small room in the basement.
And Commissioner Riffon, we've looked at this issue in the past as to whether or not we would take that cost and responsibility away from the elections office, but also making the reduction in the budget for it, or leave it where it was at. And the concern that we had was if we started a different precedent, we would be treating the elections building differently than we treat the other buildings. And so that was just kind of our thought process in the past commissions. That's not saying that it would have to be that way forever, but if we were to have facilities management take over all of the upkeep, and part of it too is, example, the guttering. I was not aware that we were having water issues. Maybe Bill Kroll is, but I wasn't. And if you're in the building, making sure that it's getting communicated to facilities.
I do know he was
Okay.
aware of that, and I think they had communications back and forth.
Yeah. And we certainly understand the stresses that Bill goes through. For instance, when it snows, who do you take care of first? Well, by golly, yeah, you ought to be taking care of the courthouse. Who do you take care of second? Well, it's probably the North Annex. Who do you take care of third? It probably is the health department. And who's fourth? It's probably the election office. We understand that.
The jail also manages their cost of the facility.
I don't think they have any other occupants there, do they? Commissioners, thank you. Sorry if we went over time. I apologize to the county treasurer if we ate into his time. If you have any additional questions or need any other information, please let us know.